and Katoa. I want to try to take you through a little bit of my background as a scientist who came here and found myself sitting in front of an actually much bigger room of MPs in 2001 at a round table held in Parliament that looked at the issues raised by the then Royal Commission, the issue of horizontal gene transfer, and try to give you a sense of where that takes us to today in your decision-making powers. At the time, I had just come from the University of California, Berkeley, where I was not only a PhD student, but also a representative to the decision-making processes in my department, the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management. And that was a university where people in my building, people I knew, had the first commercial release of gene technology. It was to protect potatoes from frost. And they were on American TV, building up the trust of the public in that kind of technology. Then we had incidences and developments where large companies were looking to buy out the entire college, the wider administrative unit in the university, and that was held back because of the public trust. But we also had an academic who found contamination of Mexican land races of maize or corn with genetic gene engineered technologies throughout Mexico, where they were originally from. So it was a hotbed. I arrived in New Zealand and had been following the issues a little bit more than anybody in my field might have, and I had a lot of capacity to work across a number of what happened to be the issues at hand. And what occurred was that essentially in that roundtable, I was able to propose a small theory that politicians could understand and that the institutions and leading technologists of the day couldn't refute. And that led to the situation we have, where we have a ban. It probably made a lot of sense. I followed science very closely for about 15 years. I haven't followed it very closely for the following 10 years. And what I can say is that 15 years, almost everything I worried about held up, except for one thing, which means that this technology is safe and the advancements we have today allow amazing advances to occur. They mean that the ban as it stands is not fit for purpose and that a whole new body of regulation is needed. And so that's your job to work through that. I'll take you through the remaining elements of my submission and a couple of really core points. First of all, I know I had a chance to check up with the then Minister for the Environment, Honorable Marian Hobbs, the other night, and she played a role in that committee meeting and in making sure those questions that I raised were also asked. And the key issue that remains is making sure that the ability of the regulator or the bodies that sit around the regulator and the institutions are able to look after not only the trust of the public, but also the trust of consumers of primary products, medical uses, and all those things. And I think there's wide agreement around that. The problem is making it happen. That leads me, you can go through my submission, you can understand how amazing these technologies are, but there's really two important points that I'd like to emphasize. The first is that we have an inability, partly because we haven't been moving forward, to engage with the public at large, with communities that would use the technologies, with iwi Māori, and wider institutions. Unless these are clearly supported elsewhere, it's my belief that this should be an explicit responsibility of the regulator at the level of chief scientist or council roles, and that they need to look after the trust, accessibility, and transparency of the regulator along the sides of that. The second points I'd like to make have to do with the precautionary principle. There, I'll just briefly say that I think it is important. It leads to a regulatory environment that actually thinks ahead to make sure that safe use is possible, that it's actually, the science is funded, and with our parlous institutions, we're going to struggle to do that. Okay, hopefully there's about 30 seconds for questions.
Very slim. Deborah.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Troy. I'm just concerned you said you felt that the regulator should have the responsibility for building up trust through education, things like that. I just see that as going directly against the regulator's role, because in a sense they would be there then, I guess. My reasons for suggesting that are twofold. I've understood that there are examples where that does occur and is good. And if it's not, this is a bill that establishes a regulator. And so I give you the responsibility for thinking about where else that should be. That's all I can do. All right. Thanks, Troy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Troy.
I'd say that's short, sharp. I won't know about the word sweet you can add to the end of that submission, but it's interesting. He's saying it's a bill about the regulation of the technology, not a bill about the education of gene technology.
Linda,
can I make comment on?
Go ahead. You're way more expert than me. I mean, that's just my layman's term of taking it.
Well, it's very gratifying to see Mr. Troy, is it Baisden?
Yes.
Pointed out the lack of the precautionary approach and the importance of ensuring that that is in any legislation or new regulation. But it also was disappointing to hear him say a number of things which in my view are factually incorrect. There actually is no ban on outdoor GMO experiments, field trials, and releases. That is something that the former science minister, who's Judith Collins, that role was taken from her. And she and the Prime Minister, Luxon, have repeatedly essentially whinged about this alleged ban on outdoor GMOs. There is no such thing. Any day of the week since 1996, anyone, an overseas multinational, New Zealand Crown Research Institute, private company, can and have applied to formerly IRMA and now the EPA for outdoor GE/GMO experiments, field trials, including cruel and inhumane transgenic animal experimentation by Ag Research at Ruakura at the Waikato, formerly Forest Research Scion, involved in experimentation with GE pine trees. And, so clearly that is actually not the case. And I would note that in the entire Auckland Northland region, which is a GM-free food producing zone, there actually isn't outright prohibition of anything other than full release. Anyone can apply to, either IRMA or the EPA for an outdoor GE experiment field trial. And when they clear the very easy hurdle of the EPA in Wellington and get the rubber stamp, which they seem to always do, they can come to the Auckland region and Northland to do these types of controversial experimentation. But they are required because of the operative provisions, policies, and rules in all the local plans, including the Auckland Unitary Plan, the Northland Regional Policy Statement, the Northland Regional Plan, Whangarei, Far North, etc., the District Council's plans. They have to prove financial fitness. They have to post a substantive bond. They actually have to be personally and financially liable for unintended and unforeseen adverse impacts of their EPA-approved activities. And interestingly enough, that has been quite a deterrent because these New Zealand Crown Research Institutes, private companies, multinationals, don't want to be held accountable. They claim that the risks are negligible, and yet they're completely unwilling to be financially accountable, to at least have to throw money at a problem if there is contamination, unforeseen, unintended adverse impacts. So I definitely bridle a bit at hearing people say that there is a ban. And in my view, what needs to happen is the Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act needs to be reviewed and strengthened. We certainly do not need a controversial new legislation and a new regulator, in my view.
Yeah, I have no problem with what you just said, Linda. And I also know that New Zealand's a very windy country, right? So as soon as you have things like, for example, a crop being tested in one farm, you have drift, and it's very hard to control or police crop drift, and so therefore, you can't put up like a big box to protect one crop from another crop that may or may not be of the same variant right next door. So it's almost impossible to protect one farm from another farm.
Makes me think of the only way to do that is the Springfield Dome from The Simpsons.
Yeah, it's actually quite offensive. The completely impractical proposals set out by the former Science Minister, Judith Collins, Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment. Neither of them have any qualifications or understanding or expertise in terms of biological systems or in terms of farming or primary production. The vectors for GMO contamination, including gene-edited organisms, the known ones are seeds, wind, pollen, vegetative material, soils, waterways, animals, insects, machinery, extreme weather events. And to think that they are claiming, which no other country that has gone down the GE road has been able to do, they're claiming that we can have coexistence between GE and conventional IPM and organic crops is frankly offensive and laughable. And on top of that, in their proposals, they also refuse to have any liability. So it's really, in my view, economic and environmental sabotage, what they're proposing.
Oh, let's get to our next submitter, former panelist of the show in the last panel, Dr. Jack, was it Heinemann?
Heinemann.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook